A new report shows that right-leaning voices were censored not only by CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, but also another substrata, different layer of other censors called the universities. They created this specific entity that was then working with the big tech companies to silence some of the biggest voices on the right side of the conversation right when it mattered most, right in the middle of 2020 when we were wanting to have a conversation. And so we're going to go through this report. It is very interesting. We'll hit the highlights, and it's entitled The Weaponization of Disinformation, okay, using pseudo experts and how the federal government partnered with universities to censor Americans' political speech. It's a big one, and it's a good one. They write, this came out from the Oversight and the Weaponization Committee, the Judiciary and the Weaponization Committee from the House of Representatives. The executive summary reads as follows. They tell us, following the 2016 presidential election, a sensationalized narrative emerged that foreign, quote, disinformation affected the integrity of the election. Now, these claims, fueled by left-wing election denialism when they said that Trump was illegitimate, it sparked a new focus on the role of social media companies. Disinformation, so-called think tanks, and experts like government task forces and university centers were all formed, all to, quote, study and combat the alleged rise in mis- and disinformation. They were never going to let this happen again. And there was something that happened in 2016. I mean, if you were on the internet, there was so much energy on the internet. It was meme magic. People were making all sorts of, interesting videos, and it was just like wildfire on the internet about Trump. And we weren't even doing, video content at that time or political content, but we were watching it happen. And then 2020 felt a little bit different, didn't it? They kind of stopped all of that from happening. People were being censored. We got multiple strikes on this channel, and the whole thing went, haywire after they were concerned about Trump winning again. So as the House Committee on Judiciary and Weaponization have shown previously, these efforts to stop foreign influence and misinformation quickly mutated to include domestic, right? So it was ma Russia, ma Russia, ma Russia, then all of a sudden it's you and me. So the First Amendment to the Constitution says rightly limits the government's role in censoring people, but they cannot outsource the censorship to a newly emerging censorship industrial complex. They tell us, enter the EIP. Okay, this is the new organization, kind of like this substrata, and I want to show you kind of what it looks like. Okay, the EIP is this. Federal government, through CISA and the GEC, they work with the EIP, which is this like fake layer to give them legitimacy. It's one step removed, all right? Federal government cannot just communicate to Facebook directly, for example, and say, can you censor all of these things? So they created a third-party intermediary called the Stanford Internet Observatory with all these organizations, creating the Election Integrity Partnership, which was a cabal to censor people who were pro-Trump or anti-state narrative. And so they tell us that since that was created, here it was a consortium of academics, so-called disinformation academics, led by Stanford, that worked directly with DHS and the Global Engagement Center, which was a multi-entity agency entity that was housed within the Department of State. And what they did was monitor and censor Americans' online speech in advance of 2020. Created in the summer of 2020 at the request of CISA, the EIP provided a way for the federal government to launder, what a great word, its censorship activities in the hopes of bypassing both the First Amendment and public scrutiny, laundered it through the EIP so that their censorship went unnoticed. Now, in the lead up to the 2020 election, amid the pandemic and other things, the American public and lawmakers debated the merits of unprecedented mid-election cycle changes to the election procedures. And we covered here during that time probably a dozen different lawsuits. We had a table with the locations and who was winning and what the status was. Now, these issues, like all contemporary discourse, in other words, can you just change all of the election rules because you're scared about a virus? Can you just do that? Because there are certain mechanisms by which you're supposed to do that. One of which is having the state legislature actually make the change so that it's constitutional. But that didn't happen. They sued a bunch of secretaries of state. The secretaries of state then made the changes on their own, and then they just dealt with it in court. And the court said, well, you do have emergency powers to create drop boxes or to waive signature requests like we saw in various locations and all sorts of insane things. So we were supposed to be able to debate that. But as American citizens, including candidates, attempted to exercise their rights, their constitutionally protected speech was intentionally suppressed as a consequence of the feds and their direct coordination with third parties, including universities and social media platforms. Speech concerning elections, which should be the most protected, was not. The interim staff report details that the federal government used their heavy hand to facilitate censorship of Americans and their political rivals and their political speech in the run-up to 2020. This report also reveals, for the first time, secret, quote, misinformation reports from the EIP's centralized reporting system. So they just had like a ticket queue. They just send people into them. We've got, Watching the Watcher channel again is posting something bad. They funnel it in here. The committee and select subcommittee got these non-public reports from Stanford University only under threat of contempt of Congress. And these reports of alleged mis- and disinformation were used to censor Americans engaged in core political speech. Now, the operation was pretty straightforward. Federal agencies operated and funded by the federal government. They submitted disinfo reports to the EIP. Then the analysts would scour the internet for additional examples, flag it, and then once all of the offending links were compiled, the EIP sent the most significant ones to the big tech platforms. So they're doing all the research, they bundle it up, and then they send all the links. So for example, like a Hunter Biden link, they go and they find all the links. They say, hey, big tech, you should limit the discoverability of these. So suppress them from being found. And also suspend a user's account. If any of the tagged influencers account retweet it, they were theoretically moving thousands of posts. So they say that these experts were quick to cite the need to combat foreign actors, I'm sure, but they didn't target foreign and inauthentic accounts. They targeted Americans, disproportionately candidates and commentators with conservative viewpoints. And despite their stated goal, they were not following through with that. They were censoring true information and political speech. And they give us some examples here. They say, who was being censored? President Donald John Trump. Now, we knew that, right? They were suppressing his posts. We all knew that. That was on the X platform. But look at all these other names. And just think about this, right? These are players in the game on the right. And if they can't speak, that's a big problem for the right. Senator Tom Tillis, Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene got censored, Newsmax, Babylon Bee, satire, joke site, Sean Hannity, Molly Hemingway, Harmeet Dillon, lawyer extraordinaire, Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, Jack Posobiec, Tom Fitton, James O'Keefe, Benny Johnson, Michelle Malkin, Sean Davis, Dave Rubin, Paul Sperry, Tracy Beans, Chanel Rion, and an untold number of everyday Americans of all political affiliations. And I can tell you this, we got multiple strikes on YouTube. I think we got a total of 4. Well, the first one was a warning. Then we had 3 others. 2 of them I appealed and 1 of them stuck. And medical misinformation and election information. And then right after January 6th, they demonetized the whole stinking channel, right? And I'm sure it was probably going through this same entity, right? They're disinformation, COVID misinformation, election misinformation, blah, blah, blah. Censoring our speech, censoring our conversation here. What was being censored? True information. Obviously, everything we say in our best attempt to be true, and all of the things that we got censored for turned out to be true, in my opinion. Now, jokes and satire and political opinions were all limited. Harmeet got this post. Newt got this post. Nuked. Gov Huckabee, Mike Huckabee got that post nuked. As part of this report, the committee is releasing all of the secret archive data that we've received. In the lead up to the election, DHS had the ability to see what American speech was being censored, and today we know they were targeting conservatives. First Amendment says you can't do that, and so we're responsible for investigating this, and that is the executive summary. Now, let's see if there's any other juicy bits in here. They're going to give us a glossary of terms. CISA created this organization. Now, here's some of the emails. They tell us, DHS in litigation before the committee has insisted that CISA and the switchboarding role was only for misinformation. But documents obtained by the committee revealed that, quote, switchboarding, okay, this is a term of art here, quote, switchboarding could also include more substantive interaction. So, for example, in one email chain, a senior CISA official explained to the Office of the Colorado Secretary of State how Twitter handled flagged parody accounts and how Twitter is likely to handle accounts that have been flagged. So emails like this contradict one of the descriptions of CISA's switchboarding as a passive role, right? So they're just saying, oh no, we're just like observing passively. No, they're weighing in on the substance and they're communicating. Like, we've gotten these censored before, so we're going to censor these other ones. Hello again, just wanted to follow up a few points. Could you please confirm that the worker in question is not a poll worker and that he did not in fact destroy the ballots? Confirms, not a poll worker. And they say here, both A and B are correct, not a poll worker and no ballots destroyed. And this is all from CISA, okay? And CISA is sending emails to Facebook. So Brian Scully is communicating, right? Like substantively. They're not just saying that this is all passive. Here's another one. Talking about CISA, there's a disclaimer talking about the removal of items. And yeah, they're flagging things. So here you go. Please see below a report from Washington, right? This one got sent from CISA. Unsurprisingly, around this time, CISA began to follow up with social media platforms about the post that they'd flagged. Hey, this guy says from so-and-so, checking in to see if there's anything that can be shared in regards to this reported incident. Hey, we asked you to censor this, man. Why is it still up? They respond from Twitter to CISA, we will ask the team to review. Now, during his transcribed interview, Matt Masterson, a former senior cybersecurity at CISA, he He testified that there were internal deliberations with CISA's lawyers about the disclaimer. Hey, Matt, do you recall any discussions during your tenure at CISA regarding if there were any constitutional implications if CISA's work engaged with, say, misinfo, disinfo coming from domestic actors? Like, did you guys talk about the legal consequences of censoring political speech of Americans? I don't recall a specific conversation around that. Obviously, they don't care. I recall that obviously the CISA lawyers were involved, as I previously indicated, for instance, around the disclaimer conversation, including lawyers, but I don't know or recall the specifics of any given conversations around that. They said that a refusal to respond to CISA might result in unfavorable action. And crucially, they said that this information may also be shared with law enforcement or other intelligence agencies. If you don't do what we ask, right? The threat of law enforcement reprisal is amplified by the fact that the FBI would inform social media companies about a misinfo report. So the social media companies were aware that CISA was sharing information. In other words, CISA indicated to the social media companies that CISA, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies may receive the misinformation report, but the disclaimer stated that only that CISA would not retaliate against the social media companies if they fail to censor the flagged content. Okay, so CISA says, look, we're working with you and we're going to tell you about these things, and if you flag them or not, whatever. Okay, we're not going to come after you, but we can't promise you that the FBI or one of the other intelligence agencies may do so, and we're sharing this with them. Okay, so we know that you got the report, and because we're working together, so like we're good, but we can't vouch for the other people. So like if you don't remove that, we're not going to do anything about it, but they might. So of course they're going to remove stuff. So social media companies were well aware that CISA was forwarding some subset of the reports to the FBI. In another interview with subcommittee, Facebook executive Alex Stamos testified that involvement with a law enforcement agency like the FBI was more worrisome than CISA. Says you can't have a casual chat with an FBI agent with you're an executive at a company. It's not safe. You end up with a $3,000 an hour row of people sitting in front of you. And what do you mean you can't have a casual conversation with the FBI? He's like, well, why is that? Well, he said, I think defense attorneys would tell you FBI agents are always looking out. You might feel like you're having a friendly conversation with them, but you might be the target. And I think there's been a number of situations in which companies have tried to engage with the FBI because they were victims of like a cybercrime, and then they end up, getting punished, or their executives get punished. Incredible. The Gestapo's in. Hey, can you help us? You're our government. You're supposed to serve us. They come in and indict you. And so, dealing with a law enforcement agency that has coercive powers is just a risky thing to do. If you're part of some bigger organization or some other thing, you don't want to know about it. They don't want you to know about it. The perspective you just shared about the FBI, do you think that that was widely shared with Facebook? Like, do you think that they were also freaked when the FBI was knocking on their door? He says, certainly. The policy of the company was that an executive could not talk to the FBI without lawyers present. Good policy. So even if the government says that their interests are aligned with them, it could be the case that the government changes its mind. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. And this is a fact that's well known by tech executives. Yeah, I think a lot of executives of all the public companies understand that there's a lot of parts of the government that can punish you for activity that you thought was appropriate, right? Don't disobey the government. Don't deny them when they tell you to censor somebody. Here's another post from, oh, look, it's misinformation at CISecurity.org. That's their email. And so you just, I don't know, they send a report. Oh, thank you for submitting a report to the Election Infrastructure Information and Analysis Center. They've got a whole stinking, forum set up. We've already forwarded your claim to our partners. And so this acted as an intermediary. There was an actual reporting portal. Matt Bryan, I've spoken with you about this concept of helping election officials. We're beginning the development of a reporting portal that could be piloted as soon as the presidential primaries. Perfect. My goal is to demonstrate the basic capabilities and roll it out. Great to meet you. Here's our efforts. We want to provide a single place for people to report misinfo. Ease the burden on election officials when they go to report misinfo. Collect the information necessary for the FBI and the DHS to do their job. And expedite and enhance the process by which social media companies are made aware of the misinformation. They're only being made aware of it. The social media companies remove it, and they remove it under threat of some other government action because they're freaked. Rightfully so, by the way. And I actually feel I have a little bit of sympathy for these big tech companies because the government is the government. I mean, it is we make fun of them being so incompetent and disgusting, but they have total raw power. I mean, they are like, when they act like it, they are tyrants, like literally, and they can do whatever they want. So these social media companies just get freaked, and I don't blame them. Provide visibility about what election, now they shouldn't censor Americans, right? They should do something about it. I'm not saying they should buckle, but you do have some, empathy from them when your government is breathing down your neck. So you facilitate information sharing between election officials and what they're seeing and provide meaningful feedback. And we're going to create this whole structure. Would you or anyone at Facebook have time to facilitate a meeting? Want to share a readout from our call? Look, this is from Facebook, man. May 31st, 2020. Hey team, wanted to share a readout from our call late Friday with DHS. Great job by everybody. No actions for us now, but we're going to reconvene, have a beta test of the new reporting portal in the next few weeks. Here's a highlight. Department of Homeland cannot openly endorse the portal because they don't want to be involved in it, but has behind the scenes signaled that NASD has told them it would be easier for many states to have one reporting channel, and CISA and ISAC would have two incoming at the same time. Now, CIS is talking to Twitter. CIS is talking to Google. They're talking to Graphica, Belfer Center. Not all the states are on board, but they want to launch the platform. They're also trying to connect API with Facebook, right? A censorship API. Social media companies, including Facebook and Twitter, engaged in months-long discussions about this. After being initially briefed in May, Facebook employees sent a list of questions to them about the portal. Here are some questions. What steps will they take to ensure that only misinfo will be surfaced via the portal? And how will you ensure quality control? Like, how are you not censoring everybody? What access controls are going to be put in place? How will the portal access be determined? What's the data retention for the portal? Man, a lot of questions here. Twitter was initially briefed. And again, Homeland appreciates the effort of Twitter to help improve the ability of election officials to submit misinfo and disinfo. And this was all, like real legitimate stuff. Remember they said the Hunter Biden laptop was misinfo. Like Facebook, Twitter also had a list of questions. They're all, kind of concerned that this may be violating their users' constitutional rights. But the pandemic reinforced CISA's desire to take a more active role. Director Krebs, one of the worst, participated in a broad stakeholder conference to provide an update about the activities. Monitoring disinformation. How quickly can we get it? Krebs, during his testimony, stated unequivocally on multiple occasions, he said CISA did not treat content on social media differently based on domestic or foreign origin. Wild. He says at one point, he even described the name CISA, which is called Countering Foreign Intelligence Task Force, as a misnomer. It's not foreign, it's American. They said, was there an effort, Chris, during this time to try to determine if the source was domestic or foreign? Like if you got a misinfo, like saying something about the pandemic or saying something about the election or whatever, or Hunter, did you try to determine if it was in fact Russian before you censored it? He says no. We certainly would look to the intelligence community if they made a determination on those things. But again, as these things pop up, things like, Hammer and Scorecard, it doesn't necessarily matter whether it's foreign or domestic. Well, it does for our side. Again, our authorities are rooted in the Homeland Security Act, which enables us to act on domestic or foreign threats. Again, they don't come waving a flag. So Homeland gives them permission to censor your political speech in America. Krebs reiterated their approach. He said, when did these discussions regarding domestic influence first start? I don't recall. Okay, were they ongoing by the beginning of 2020? Again, I don't recall, says Chris. I don't recall the moment in time or the periods of time within which we were thinking about the distinction between domestic and foreign. Again, I think this gets to, as we ultimately saw with rumor control, narratives are narratives, and we're providing explanation on how things actually work. So again, it would not matter if it was foreign or domestic for context, again, of rumor control. Our government is saying they're in charge of rumor control. What? In America, CISA's Rumor Control Initiative. And he's saying we have total right to do it under the Homeland Act. CISA also considered its authority as extending to domestic speech. So the First Amendment gets put into the shredder because some Homeland Security Act. They sent this email from Robert Shull, CISA, to securingdemocracy.org, I'm sure, wrecking democracy. From somebody, hey Rob, this was just one article. I want you to amplify Stop the Steal. Otherwise, we haven't seen the accounts. Obviously, we're seeing domestically, particularly around mail-in fraud, is very concerning. I'll keep you in the loop if something pops up. Mail fraud disinfo is inbounds for us this time, whether it's domestic or foreign. So if you see something you're worried about, let us know, especially in our messaging can help. So if you have questions about mail fraud, you are now part of a rumor and they have rumor control. So my friends, this is what they are reporting. Now the rest of this is, quite extensive. Lot of emails detailing the rest of this, and we'll post this full PDF file on robertgovea.com if you want to read through the rest of this. But they were censoring humor and satire. They were censoring jokes. Here, how many emergency boxes of votes did they find? Right? That got censored. More censorship of emergency Democrat votes. Candace Owen got censored. Charlie Kirk got censored. Sean Davis, Sean Hannity. They use coercion to try to get people to remove things. And the whole thing is just disgusting and reprehensible. And many of these people are still working in our government, right? They're still there. They censored Thomas Massie, and they've got just a ton of evidence there. So the censorship was consequential in 2020. I don't doubt it for a minute. I think it definitely swayed some percentage points, and it was a big, big deal. Now, the Supreme Court has said that the government can still interface with a lot of these other entities, and they can do so because the Missouri versus Biden case case is still pending in front of SCOTUS. So until we get an order, the government can still engage in a lot of these conversations, and we don't know what they're doing. We know that Elon is in control of X now, but YouTube and Facebook and all of the other platforms that were out there originally, they're still thinking this way. Does this portal still exist? Are they still reporting this stuff? Hopefully Congress starts asking some questions about it, because we've got another election coming up pretty dang soon, and we'd like not to be censored this time. We'll continue to cover this, my friends. Thank you for joining us as we do. Thank you for subscribing and sharing the show with a friend or family member, inviting them over to join us, because there's a lot more to unpack here, and we'll look forward to seeing you and them on the next one.